Welcome to the Beat Sessions, your place for all things music. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Before we get this album review started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge Ozzy Osborne. It's the best creative minds that are able to take their art in a direction that is uniquely their own. And I cannot even begin to imagine what the music landscape would sound like without Ozzy's contributions. I think that as long as people continue to come together and form rock and roll bands, his spirit will always be alive in each and every one of those individuals every time they step up to their respective instrument. Thank you for everything that you shared throughout your career and throughout your life, Prince of Darkness. May you rest in peace. And now, let's talk about some other dudes that have made a career out of embracing the darkness. Alice Cooper has returned with a new record entitled The Revenge of Alice Cooper. They released that on July 25th. This is the 8th studio album for the band and their follow-up to 1973's Muscle of Love. The original band is back. Let's go. I've lived in Arizona pretty much my whole life. Grew up loving rock and roll, running cross country, and all things spooky and gothic. This band is truly one of my first loves, and I'm so pumped that this finally happened within my lifetime. Just about 4 months shy of 52 years since they released their last record as a band, and just such a privilege to bear witness to the 4 surviving members step back into the fold of the rock and roll fray. This album review may be a little biased. And as a solo artist, Alice Cooper has released 22 projects under the moniker that he officially made his name back in the heyday of the band. So that makes this his 30th overall record, and I think that that is a pretty big deal as well. Lots to celebrate here. And who better to lead production than the legendary Bob Ezrin, who was also at the helm for 1971's Love It to Death and Killer, 1972's Schools Out, and 1973's $1 Billion Babies. Bob has also produced a number of Cooper's solo efforts, including the last 4, which are all quite enjoyable. 2011's Welcome to My Nightmare, 2017's Paranormal, 2021's Detroit Stories, and 2023's Road. And aside from Road, considering everything that was going on, there was maybe something bigger that was beginning to stir. On the previous 3 before Road, those records include rhythm guitarist Michael Bruce, bassist Dennis Dunaway, and drummer Neil Smith. They all came out to collaborate on different tracks on each of those projects. And I think that there was kind of like no doubt that the idea of this new record had been thrown around in those sessions. This is a band that right before they broke up was feeling the mounting tension within their ranks back in 73 and was just supposed to take a temporary hiatus. And I guess it's still the case. I don't think anybody thought that it would take a half a century for them to return. And I would also say that if the band had any hard feelings to sort out, they took care of that with the track I Hate You from 2021's Detroit Stories. The group roasted each other on that record, and they also roasted former lead guitarist Glenn Buxton, who sadly passed away back in 1997. On I Hate You, Alice sings, "We hate you, we hate your sneer, the cigarettes, the smell of beer, but most of all, we're filled with rage at the empty space you left on stage." There's no denying that his presence is missed on this record, and he's regarded as one of the greatest players of all time and contributed some killer riffs to the Alice Cooper catalog. However, the songwriting has always been a collective effort with this band, especially with Bruce and Dunaway providing many solo credits throughout this catalog. And along with contributions from Ezrin, I think it's just great to see that songwriting history, that group effort continue on this new project. So I do think it's really groovy that the track What Happened to You does feature an unreleased guitar part from Buxton, and it's great to see the band give him that nod. The album Also features new lead guitarist Jesse Hughes, I believe is how you say his last name. There's also Rick Tedesco on this record, and special guest Robbie Krieger of The Doors. I think that The Revenge of Alice Cooper, all things considered, really is everything that longtime fans could have hoped for with a new record. Steeped in the sounds that made them so legendary, but this is a record that also sounds really fresh and contemporary. You can just feel that these guys were ready to pursue this project, and I think it's going to make the tour that they're currently on right now a hell of a lot of fun. Please, if any of you get to go to those shows, drop those experiences in the comments. This album features that classic shock rock macabre, especially on opener Black Mamba and Kill the Flies and One Night Stand, along with other enjoyable rock and roll stories and a couple of nods to Glenn as well. The second half of the record is a little more interesting. It explores lots of just fun rock and roll terrain, including hard rock and blues. There's elements of garage and surf rock that come into play, and you get even a little bit of punk in there with some moments also that dip into the realm of jazz and R&B. There are a multitude of legendary classic rock artists that I hear on this record, including the likes of Chuck Berry, Jerry Lewis, the Kinks, Small Faces, and the Yardbirds especially, because there is a great cover. And it just really makes for an enjoyable and well-rounded album experience. I find the structure of all these compositions to be enjoyable as well, very adventurous and fun. And I got to say, I was initially concerned with the track list and the runtime, but after listening to this thing a couple of times, I'm hard-pressed to think of any tracks that could be removed to make this record more concise and fun. And after 50 years, honestly, I'd say to hell with runtime. Just give us all you've got and let us enjoy the fact that this is happening. This thing kicks off with Black Mamba, opens with this haunting, big open bass riff and electric guitar that almost kind of sounds like a howl. And how could you not begin this thing with a Snake reference? Alice delivers a spoken word vocal for the intro that is just delightfully spooky and evil. And then that bass riff picks up a bit as the guitar plays in the background. And then Alice delivers the line, "And decide if I should bite." Dennis gives a little tickle on that bass, and it just kicks things into gear. Again, with Robbie Krieger featured on this song, joining in on the fun. I mean, given his style, he's perfect for what this track is doing. And it's a funky and bluesy lead guitar going big with the wah pedal. This thing just sinks its teeth into you with a just chunky head bobbing groove and simple yah, yah, yah vocal hook. Alice's vocals shift back and forth between melody and spoken word segments, which I think is really fun. And in a lot of ways, kind of like channel this vaudevillian freak show element. There's sick little bass bits that usher in a solo right before the 3-minute and 30-second mark, with the track going big for the last minute on the refrain of those yah, yah, yahs. Your second track is entitled Wild Ones, comes out the gate hitting hard with punk rock energy and a searing lead riff. The first verse opens with the guitars backing off, and then you get this open riff that plays with lots of space and allows the rhythm to really shine on this one. The chorus works into a hook that plays off the track's title and the big guitar energy that is there. The second verse features a little more solo work and a second chorus that feels a bit more mellow. It's kind of an interesting shift in the song. I talked about that adventurous composition structure, though. The song's bridge works on a refrain of the hook and with a solid punk rock rhythm and without any lead guitar. I really like this part here. There's a second bridge around the 3-minute mark with the vocal hook and another killer bass lick that leads this thing into a coda that finishes with a blistering solo. And I just wish that that solo was longer because it is so filthy. I absolutely love it, especially what Dennis is doing behind that on the bass in this track. Your third song is entitled Up All Night, opens with a brief vocal that gives way to a big mid-tempo drums. A hard rock and blues lick makes its way onto the scene shortly after, with grinding bass to match. The track feels minimal through the first verse as the opening riff shifts into this open chord territory. I feel like there's a lot of that on this record, and I really dig it. The chorus picks the tempo up with fuller textures and more of kind of like a glam feel on this one, and a hook that finishes with some classic rock innuendo. Lyrics are pretty funny at the end of this one. The song repeats this pattern a second time, working into a solo around the 2-minute mark. There's a brief moment of kind of like poppy surf rock before a final round of the hook and a big guitar finishes this thing out. Your fourth track is entitled Kill the Flies. Bit of a highlight here. It is a continuation of the 1971 track Ballad of Dwight Fry and gets us back into that eerie terrain with the macabre guitar and what sounds like, honestly, like a vibraphone, but it just captures that creepy essence of like a spooky child in a movie. I don't know what it is about it, but it gives me the chills. It shifts into mid-tempo hard rock stylings after about 20 seconds, and Alice works in with a nasally vocal that's hushed at times and creates this haunting allure. The hook is catchy with lots of oohs, and I feel like they channel surf rock melodies as well. It's a good switch in there. And they continue to back Alice as he sings Kill the Flies. It's such a great contrast that brings the song to life, a tale of being institutionalized. That spooky vibraphone comes back around the 2-minute and 30-second mark, assisted with some guitar and bass play that takes us into a solo on this one. It's definitely a highlight for me on this record. Your fifth track is entitled One Night Stand, opens with a thick bass riff, up-tempo percussion, and a simple surf rock style riff with lots of open space and a brooding mood that keeps the creepiness going. The track keeps this feel through the first verse, taking a few melodic turns that work into a chorus that kind of reminds me of Secret Agent Man. Honestly, I feel like the melody, it's kind of there a little bit. It's fun. Just a minute after the track shifts into a little bridge that has this frat rock feel, finishing with the solo and transitioning back into a verse. The band works this element back in once more, and the track finishes with a big solo in front of that groovy, upbeat rock and roll feel. Your sixth track is entitled Blood on the Sun. This is a fun one. Biggest track on the record. Get this big crash of instrumentation that gives way to an arpeggiated acoustic riff and a soaring vocal from Alice. It's an interesting moment of balladry with lots of light, soothing melodies that make it a bit of a shock, but hell, that's what this band does. They're a shock rock band. Stomping drums build in to usher in a chorus that fills out with hard rock and instrumentation, and then it leads into a second verse that has lots of rock and energy. Definitely takes a big turn from the intro. Big contrast from that first verse. The song works into a breakdown a little after the 2-minute mark, with the drums really picking up the energy for some solo work. It's followed by this big staccato crash, like these big staccato crashes of all the instruments, I should say, that fade out and then open back up to that opening riff. It's almost kind of like a 2-part track. It's pretty interesting. That opening riff comes back in. There's military-style drums and a searing guitar solo that moves methodically at a mid-tempo pace. Then you get these soaring vocals from Alice that build in behind to shift the track back into high gear to finish with more solo work and a refrain of that title to close this thing out. Your seventh track is entitled Crap That Gets in the Way of Your Dreams. Don't we all know it? Opens with a great garage style riff, and it just hits right in the right side of your headphones to open up. I love the play there in the production. A drum fill brings everything to life with the solo highlighting the intro, and then the verse plays with that signature staccato movement of garage rock and a pinched vocal delivery from Alice. The bass does some killer work through all of this, leading into a chorus that mimics the intro. The second verse is fun, with the bass coming to the forefront of the track to fill in all the space between those kind of open chord guitars. And this one really taps, honestly, like really into that early Kinks sound. I just felt that so much. You got a solo that goes to work around the 2-minute mark on this track. It is definitely just a fun, high energy track. Leads into your eighth track, Famous Face. Got guitar that opens briefly on its own before this one steers things back into hard rock territory with kind of a metal style riff to open. Get this bouncy staccato bass lick and classic rock production that works at an urgent mid-tempo pace. It's going to usher us into the first verse with this grinding open chord riff that plays off of Alice's vocals. I think that back and forth is pretty fun. The chorus adopts a darker edge with droning texture and a subtle single note from a piano that's barely audible, but it's just perfect at the level that it's at. The track moves into a solo while the rhythm continues to drive at that same pace. And I love the line that opens the second verse. From Wall Street to the Sunset Strip, you strut your junk around like you're hot shit. Why fans like you's a mystery. I wish to hell you'd get off my TV. Just that like classic Alice snarkiness. I dig it. There's a little more solo work around the 3 minute mark, taking us into the coda with a refrain of the title hook and leading into your ninth track, Money Screams. Got these drums and guitars that all match each other to open this. It's kind of like a mid 60s mod style track and also combines a bit of garage rock and punk. Honestly, think of a band like the Small Faces. The verse works into a tight groove with this muted riff and a stop and go structure. The chorus brings continuity to the instrumentation with driving percussion and light vocal melodies and a couple of really catchy hooks. I love all the vocal play on this one. You got a solo that bridges the chorus into the second verse with the bass lick really shining on this one from Dennis. And a second solo bridges the song into a final go on the chorus and a big coda with a refrain on the hook. And honestly, I feel like there's really more of like a prominent R&B feel at the end of this track. What a Sid opens with a vocal count that ushers in a jazzy R&B style number that is a nod to Dennis and to Sid Barrett. Or excuse me, not Dennis, to Glenn Buxton and Sid Barrett. There's this big jazz feel from a hi-hat and finger snaps at work with a matching guitar and bass riff that create this mysterious, kind of like slightly unnerving air. A few guitar shifts, a few guitar shuffles transition this one into this total like vaudevillian lounge feel. Just a fun contemporary take on music from the 30s. And like think of Vic Mizzy's theme from the Addams Family. Got a big solo that takes the listener out in a coda that steers back towards the feel of the open. But again, I love the nod to Glenn and to Sid on this one. Your 11th track is entitled Intergalactic Vagabond Blues. Big drum roll takes us back into that classic hard rock and blues terrain with a great harmonica bit to boot. The track keeps this pace through the verses with the harmonica serving as a bridge between. The chorus rides into kind of like a pop-driven surf rock feel, especially with the vocal harmonies that are playing on this one. And then it takes a sharp turn into the hard rock and realm with high energy rhythm and blistering guitar work. The song is going to work back into that blues element to build towards another go on the chorus and then just totally rocks out to finish. It's another highlight for me. I think it's a really cool track. Leading into your 12th song, What Happened to You? Heavily distorted guitar opens this thing briefly before stomping drums, driving bass, and heavy guitar provide an Alice Cooper style take on an upbeat classic rock from the late 50s. And there's some rockabilly and boogie woogie thrown in on this one that brings it to life. And again, this is the track that features Glenn and that old guitar part that was unreleased. Second verse features great piano play that shifts into driving texture for the chorus. And then the track, it breaks down around the minute and 45-second mark to usher in a solo that takes the track into another verse. The piano is totally the highlight on this one for me, with the track breaking down one more time around the 3-minute mark to lead into a solo that's going to take us into the finish. And then your penultimate track, I Ain't Done Wrong. It's a great Yardbirds tune that serves as the penultimate track. And great guitar play in the right side of the headphones. Love that production again. And taking the lead on a couple of big crashes of instrumentation to open. This one is hard hitting, got that staccato blues style with a snare drum. And as a focal point, I really just love the great work from the harmonica on this track once more. It's a combination of what kind of feels like Delta blues and punk rock. Guitar solo goes to work around the 2-minute mark and mellows out in a return to that staccato blues element to finish this one out. Great cover, and it's going to lead into your final track. Number 14 is entitled See You on the Other Side, another one for Glenn. It's going to open with this mellow arpeggiated electric riff, soft cymbal play, and a somber moment of reflection that quickly builds into hard rockin' energy. The track backs off, continuing with a little more of that guitar play that ultimately turns back into that big hard rockin' feel, a big anthem that celebrates Glenn, and it kind of feels like the countless people that these guys have worked with in their lives that are no longer here with us. The next verse works the bass a bit more, along with some interesting guitar play to finish this thing off. And if you happen to purchase the vinyl LP, it's a double disc edition, totally worth the money in my opinion. I know I said I'm biased, but I mean, after 50 years, how could you not? There are a couple of tracks on a 7-inch LP. You got Return of the Spiders 2025 and Titanic over Underture. And Glenn is actually featured on both of those as well, which is a pretty cool little extra that you get with the vinyl package. Just thrilled. I mean, what a cool experience for all of us. I mean, I think any fan of rock and roll can appreciate just what's going on here in general. But I really I love this record. I think that it comes together extremely well. Again, I even with the runtime, with the 14 tracks, it doesn't really feel like there's a down moment on this thing. And, you know, a total nod to the entire band and to Bob Ezrin for coming together and just making this feel like just a natural, organic thing. And it almost kind of feels like these guys, after 5 decades, just stepped into the studio, picked up right where they left off, and it feels just natural and authentic. And I'm loving everything about this thing. I'm gonna give it a 7.9. Actually, you know what? To hell with it. We're gonna give this thing a solid 8 out of 10. We're gonna vinyl please it for sure. And I hope you enjoyed listening to this record. I hope you find this review helpful as well. Please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, do all the things to help me blow this project up in 2025, and stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. We'll see you next time on the Beat Sessions.